Hello, hello. You're getting the first glimpse at Eric Corey Fried, who's going to be joining us in just a second, or actually a few minutes. We'll welcome him back with a formal introduction. My name is Brian Solis. I'm the Global Innovation Evangelist at Salesforce. I am a longtime digital anthropologist, and I still think of myself as an aspiring author as I try to get my next book formalized. I put together a proposal. I spent months putting together this proposal. And as I finished it, I realized maybe this isn't the book that I want to write right now. So I have to get to work on whatever that book is going to be, and I got to do it quickly. But with that said, thank you so much for joining us here on Intersections. My co-host, co-founder, the wonderful John Kao, is actually traveling today. He's in Denver doing entrepreneur, innovator stuff, so we'll miss him. I am really going to need your participation today. So welcome. I'm going to need your questions. I'm going to need to know where you're watching from so that we could bring this world together. Please do feel free to share your observations, your experiences, your questions for our guests. That's what this show is all about. We're fortunate to have you. So with that said, I'm going to just go ahead and jump into the formal introduction. I'm going to also be producing the show today, so I'll be multitasking. I will share your questions. I will share your comments on screen. Hello from Iran. Wow, fantastic. Thank you for joining us today, Irfan. I am going to officially now welcome you to Intersections, a weekly conversational jam session that dives deep into the intersections among technology, innovation, culture, and ideas. Every week, we bring diverse personalities and worldviews together in service of greater understanding and unlearning. We are coming at you on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, so many wonderful opportunities to engage with you across so many platforms. I know that you're zoomed out. I know that you have back-to-back meetings. Maybe your face is stuck in an Excel spreadsheets all day, but thank you for taking time to tune in. And if you're not watching us live, if you're watching from intersectionslive.com, well, thank you for tuning in. And we're live every Thursday, 10:30 a.m. Pacific. Now, with that said, I'd like to welcome our first guest. His name is Eric Corey Fried. He's an award-winning architect. He's an author. He's a global speaker. He's the founding principal of Organic Architect. It's a visionary design leader actually, I'm going to let him tell you this whole story because it's going to lead to a conversation that is... Well, for those, for example, living in California, specifically Southern California, a conversation that is near and dear to our hearts right now, climate change. And climate change is, if you're looking at the headlines, we're in a major drought right now. And so something tells me we're going to have to get used to it. The house that I'm in right now, it was almost impossible to get insurance because everything is a wildfire zone now. And so we're living in some really interesting times. And for those individuals who still want to deny that change is happening, whatever the cause, come over here and pay my insurance bill, if you don't mind. Now, with that said, I'm going to bring Eric up to the stream. Eric, welcome to Intersections.
Oh, hi. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So you're tuning in from a special place in California, Palm Springs. Your family is on vacation. You're taking time to spend with us. We really appreciate it. I'm just going to have to apologize in advance, Eric, because I'm going to be multitasking. I have to do stuff like this, share where people are chiming in from London, Mexico City. Man, I haven't been to Mexico City for a couple of years. Some of the best restaurants, some of the best nightlife. We have Texas. Wow. And look at this. Already have a fan for your line of work, Eric.
Wow.
Fantastic. Hey, well, Gustavo, I'm learning about this today. I'm excited to learn about this. Eric, share with us your work. Share with us a bit about the company you founded, and then we'll dive right in.
So I'm an architect. I design buildings and have for 30 years. And early in my life, back when I was 8, I started drawing buildings. And people started encouraging me to check out this building by Frank Lloyd Wright. I grew up in Philadelphia, and there's exactly one Frank Lloyd Wright building in Philadelphia. And so I'm 8 years old, and my parents took me to see this thing. It's a beautiful synagogue that was one of the last buildings that he did, and I was just awestruck. And it It showed me that you could have buildings that are really connected to nature. And then fast forward, and I'm, basically studying under former students of his, and then I'm working for students of his. And then in '97, I started my own firm called Organic Architect, really in deference to Frank Lloyd Wright. And for years designed, all sorts of weird, creative, fun things for people that were very, very green. And then over the last decade or so, I've really expanded into much more commercial pursuits. And now today I get to be Director of Sustainability at Canon Design, which is one of the top 50 best firms in the country. And last year we were voted second most innovative company in North America by Fast Company. So it's been a kind of a fun ride. And along the way, I've written 12 books on sustainability. So, my entire life has been me. I feel like my entire life has been me complaining about green building, and therapeutically trying to get people to get on board with it.
Wow. So basically you're a slacker. And
yeah.
We're going to have to get on that. Holy 12 books. Eric, all right. So let's dive into the origin then, and a little bit more of a descriptor on what organic architecture is. Then I'm going to dive into some of the questions that I have for you.
Okay. Organic architecture was actually Frank Lloyd Wright's term. If you're not familiar, Frank Lloyd Wright is arguably one of the greatest architects of the 20th century, and is responsible for so many of the things that we take for granted in modern living. And he described organic architecture really as this synthesis between built form and nature. I would argue that he was the first green architect, really, because he was doing innovative things like orienting his building to the sun, using natural materials, using biophilic design, designing buildings that were heated and cooled just through the normal climate cycles, and doing it in a very beautiful way. So it's, that was kind of my early beginnings. And you got to remember, this was, this is the 80s and 90s. Nobody wanted to hear about this, right? They just wanted to build their big dumb glass boxes that you just pump in tons of energy and keep them heated and cooled that way. And so here I come along, this kind of short little guy from the East Coast saying, no, there's a better way to do this. And it's a very bizarre life to basically be complaining to people all the time about how to do it better. But really in the last I think 15 years, what we've seen a revolution. Climate change has really come to the forefront of our attention. Everybody's finally realizing that this is an urgent issue and we can't put it off any longer.
Well, let's talk about that urgent issue, because we have some of the most incredible spokespeople, ranging from teenagers to architects to world leaders, urging essentially everybody to pay attention to this beyond architecture, to the fact that climate change is upon us, that it is real. We could debate about the origins or the causes of it, but it is changing the climate, that is. So what is the role then of climate change on its, what's the best way to put this? I guess disruption in terms of the practice of architecture and commercial building, or eventual disruption? And what is it that organic architects like yourself are doing differently now moving forward?
Well, part of the problem is that buildings are responsible for half of this. Half of the carbon emissions come from the construction operation of buildings. And that's why you've seen so many architects talking about this, because we're really to blame here, right? That's kind of the problem. So if we want to solve climate change, if we want to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees centigrade, which is everybody's agreed to target, we have to change our buildings, and not just the new buildings that we build, but we really have to transform our existing buildings. And so to do that, you're looking at something that I think people aren't really accustomed to. Whole new ways of generating energy, whole new ways of heating and cooling that really might be too advanced or outside of a lot of people's comfort zones. I would also argue that because of all the effort that goes into making a building, that has what we call embodied carbon. And I think we're almost at a point now where you won't be able to afford to tear down an existing building and just build a new one, because the embodied carbon in that existing building will be too valuable. And the carbon taxes on that would make it prohibitive for anybody to just, we'll just knock it down and build something else. And so we're going to be radically rethinking how we look at our buildings in a very profound way.
Well, I mean, this is makes me wonder if it's not too little, too late. We had so many aspirations for architects, to build the tallest building, the most interesting building, and now we have to retrofit essentially existing buildings to be a little bit more environmentally friendly. We're changing our new building construction moving forward. You have innovators who are looking at all kinds of technologies to help reduce our carbon footprint. But I think I want to ask with the more simple question before we get into the more complex questions, which is it just makes sense that this should have been a practice long before. Makes sense that it should be a massive sense of urgency right now. But what is it that's holding us back from just pedal to the metal and rocking and rolling?
Well, I mean, you touched upon, that's probably the most frustrating part. It's not like I'm saying that we should give every fish a bicycle or anything unreasonable here. Everything that we're describing, that a typical green architect would be describing, would be things that are completely reasonable. Let's build buildings that produce more energy than they consume. Let's build buildings that avoid all known cancer-causing chemicals. Let's actually measure how much carbon emissions come from our buildings. All these things are doable and reasonable. But what's kept us from moving forward has been the fossil fuel industry. Right, the coal and oil industry lobbies Congress, makes sure no new laws are passed, and what you have is a system where we talk about making change, and then ultimately dies on the vine. You see a lot of propaganda. Right, look at just dealing with climate change, how all they need to do is plant a seed of doubt. All they need to do is say, well, some of the scientists are not quite convinced, and that was enough for it to just run rampant in kind of just dragging out this discussion. And that's part of the problem. Think about it this way. We've known about the greenhouse gas effect, that certain gases are getting trapped in the atmosphere and warming the earth. We've known about this since the 1860s, which is back in the Civil War. Every major president, right, dating back to JFK, has been made aware of the threat of climate change and has tried to do something about it. So you've got basically, 80 years of modern political discussion around doing something about climate change and really doing relatively nothing. And President Biden made climate change one of his 4 pillars, which is amazing. And in Earth Day of this year, he committed to cutting embodied carbon in half by 2030, which is just 8.5 years away. That's a great goal. It's not even enough. As ambitious as that sounds, it's not even enough, but it's a great start. And if we can start with that and get on our pathway to that, then we're really headed towards zero carbon by 2050, which is where we need to be.
Wow. Okay. Well, I just got goosebumps hearing that it's one of President Biden's pillars, because I mean, what was it? Just 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we're pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord. The machine of sowing seeds of doubt has gone into overdrive, it seems. I can't get my mind around it. We all live on the same planet, and lobbying for anything that puts the dollar ahead of your family's life and well-being and livelihood is just, I don't know. I mean, I just wish, I kind of say, like, you got to fight fire with fire. And it just seems at some point there just has to be, you just have to play the game on the other side in order to be able to do what's right for humanity. It sucks to say that, but I don't know, man. It just feels like the right side is way too nice. And trying to do the right thing is noble and purposeful, of course. But I think, for anybody listening out there that has strategies for combating those seeds of doubt and combating lobbyists that are bent on just making things worse, I would love to hear from you about what we can do differently, and we'll bring you on as a guest of the show. Now, before, Eric, I bring you the next question on, please, everyone, as you're watching, share your questions. I'll put them on screen. Share where you're tuning in from. Vinay, thank you for making the quick visual bookshelves for all of Eric's books. That was very cool. I'll make sure to copy and paste that into all of the other areas. So, Eric, I don't know. I heard that coal was clean now, so I guess that's not a problem. But in all seriousness, what's standing in the way, aside from all of the the propaganda from your customers? So those building or reimagining existing buildings, what are some of the challenges that you face in convincing them to make decisions faster or deeper around this?
I wouldn't call it a challenge. I would call it more of a commitment. So, for example, I work with a lot of universities, right? We design buildings for universities. We'll often help them with their master planning. We've been doing their climate action planning now. Convincing them is not the issue. These are obviously educated people. They're aware of the threat of climate change. Most universities have some sort of sustainability policy. A lot of them have made very bold sustainability commitments of carbon neutrality by 2050. The trouble is that the idea of climate change, the idea that the entire Earth is warming and our entire way of life is at risk, is such a big problem that it's what scientists call an out of context problem. It's almost unfathomable for our little human brains to process. And, I have to remind myself that, I've had 30 years to think about this. I've had 30 years of discussions with climate scientists and study to get acclimated to the scale of the problem. But for most people, they haven't. And so that's why you have a whole contingent of people that don't want to believe it. I appreciate that. I get that. I don't want to believe it either. So it's all understandable. And, I used to, before the pandemic, I would speak at 50 plus events a year all over the country. And every now and again, I'd get a heckler.
I get the same ones. I know what you're going to say.
And they stand up and they start shouting at me. Well, my background's in comedy. So, I can just decimate a heckler from stage. I'm standing on stage. I have a microphone. They don't. I already come prepared with ways to just cut them down. So I used to love getting hecklers. Now I don't do that anymore, in part because I'm not here to argue or debate climate change. It's not worthy of debate. I would no sooner debate it than I would debate gravity. I'm really here to raise awareness so we can stop it. That's really what I'm here to do. So there's a lot of glimmers of hope. And your Salesforce, for example, announced just a month ago that they were going to require that all of their suppliers have carbon commitments in their contracts. Well, that is a huge market signal to say, if you want to work with us, you need to be on the same page. I wish all companies would copy that. It would be wonderful. So
yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Eric.
Happening.
And that's important, because I was going to ask you the next question. Well, I should also say that Mark Benioff is he absolutely believes that stakeholder capitalism is a way to transform all businesses, that they should all have an impact on society. And I will say that in our State of Connected Customer research that published late last year, I think it was the number 3 area where customers, so business customers and consumers, said that they wanted to see businesses transform. The number 3 things was their role in society. So not just CSR, corporate social responsibility programs, but actual impacts, positive impacts on society. The number 1 thing, and these are all the things that they could choose, because number 2 was service and support. I think we all want to see customer support and service better. But the number 1 thing was trustworthiness too, because if you look at just whatever side of the spectrum you're on, the last 6 years in particular have been incredibly divisive, and it's exposed a lot of the ugliness in the world. And so trust and societal roles that we play is actually going to be a competitive advantage. So if you're watching this right now and you're an executive and you're thinking about, what's the role I can play in carbon reduction or society, Eric just shared with you what Salesforce was doing, which was asking our vendors and our partners to have in contract, in writing, commitments to positive change. And so the question I was going to ask you, Eric, is what are you seeing in terms of, there's the doubt that we could sow into the public, but I got to believe that anyone who runs a building or is building a building wants to do the right thing. Even though it's more expensive, I got to imagine for now, are there financial incentives? Are there things that we're seeing from governments, creative applications to help accelerate this type of transformation?
So this is a great segue. So let's talk about this process. Let's say I'm dealing with a hospital, or a university, or any sort of large institutional entity that wants to build a building, right? Well, they have a budget, obviously. There's reality. They have a budget that they have to deal with. And the budget is a factor of a lot of things, as you know. Maybe it's a factor of financing. Maybe it's a factor of how much money they have in the bank. Maybe it's a factor of how much their donors have been given to this. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. This is their budget. And then they say, we want to build the budget, the building for this budget. Can we? And the answer is always yes, of course, right? Well, now here comes me coming along saying, we need to do more. We need to build a building that looks at its embodied carbon. We need to build a building that generates its own energy. And suddenly, any green architect is going to look like I'm the problem, right? I'm the one that's adding to the cost. So I don't do that. I mean, I used to, but I don't do that. Here's what I do. I go in and I show them the outcomes of having a green building. So let's say you're building a new office building. Well, my building's a better building. My building has happier employees. My building has fewer sick days. My building has much less operational costs, right? My building has higher productivity. I can measure all of those things. So now what I do is I show these outcomes and say, well, here are the possible outcomes for your office building. What are these worth to you? And that's the discussion that we have. Okay, well, then we're going to prioritize these for our outcomes that we're going to target. We're still going to have the same budget. Your building's not going to cost any more. But instead of maybe spending way too much money on, I don't know, the finishes in the lobby, maybe instead we could prioritize other things. And all in pursuit of those very important, very valuable outcomes. I would argue that most of sustainability has really been trying to play the game of build the building as cheaply and quickly as possible. And instead, what we should have been doing is selling them on the big vision of here are the benefits that a green building provides. And we sell them on the benefits. And by taking this outcomes-based approach to sustainability, you can really start to turn people's heads with it. And so that's what we've been doing at Canon Design.
I mean, that's really powerful, Eric, because I've seen outcome-based narratives across the board in all kinds of transformations. So beyond just climate change, I mean, we have to think about innovation. We have to think about human-centered design. We have to think about the fact that customers and consumers have become much more conscious in the last 16 months. I mean, there's so many things driving transformation that essentially, like climate change itself, most of the time decision makers can't get their mind around these big elephants, and helping them take one bite at a time or one step at a time towards that transformation and understanding that the role that they can play in this when it's tied to outcomes. I mean, who doesn't want to be more productive? Who doesn't want to see better wellness with their employees? Who doesn't want to see better performance at all of those fronts? And I think connecting those dots for them is incredible. And so I guess for those watching, what that is, it's about narrative. Right. So you have to turn that narrative inside to understand that you can make an impact. And then look, I got to imagine, Eric, you see this too, that it becomes an element of branding for these companies, that it becomes an area of differentiation, knowing that number three, the number three thing that customers want to see from any business is the role that they play in society has a positive impact. Of course, that becomes a brand pillar and a competitive differentiator. What are some of the other things, Eric, that let's just say decision makers don't know about, that they should know about in existing buildings in terms of that outcomes-based approach that they should be thinking about that they're not today?
So there's two others to really pay attention to. The first one is, what are your current pain points? And I will go through an exercise with clients of mapping out where you're currently spending money that you don't want to be, right? Is it you're spending money to throw things away, so your waste costs you money? Are you spending money to maintain existing infrastructure? Every corporate campus and every university campus have these chilled loops and heated loops that run below ground that heat and cool the buildings. Well, they were designed usually in the 50s or 60s, and they're horribly inefficient. Well, those are other pain points. So let's map out those pain points, and wherever you're spending money and sinking cost into every year, maybe suddenly you're open to exploring greener, healthier, smarter alternatives. Number two is we really start to look at beyond the outcomes and beyond the pain points is where do you want to be headed with this? So 23% of the Fortune 500 companies now have a carbon neutrality goal. 100% of them, virtually all of them, have at least a net zero energy goal. And what you're seeing is that insurance companies financial investors, corporate institutional investors are demanding that they have these goals. So the third question that I ask is, how does this one building tie to your larger corporate goals, right? There's so many clients that we deal with that have this beautiful commitment on their website, and it's, flashing in neon. Look, we're going to be carbon neutral by 2050. And then when it comes to their buildings, they're like, well, just, make it greener. It's very vague. This very vague language. And so I hold their feet to the fire and I go, look, your C-suite wants you to get to carbon neutrality. And I understand that the facilities and corporate real estate people aren't connected to that, but let's have that conversation. Let's connect you to that. How is this building going to get you there? And once we have that conversation, suddenly amazing possibilities open up. And also possibilities to rethink how are we paying for the building? How are we getting donations for the building? How are we calculating the cost of the building? And if we start to look in those things, it starts to open up a whole realm of possibilities for innovation. I'm really selling, as you're figuring out, I'm not selling anybody on sustainability. I'm selling them on innovation using a change management approach. That's really what I'm doing. Don't tell anybody, but that's really what I'm doing.
One of the things I appreciate about what you just said there is exactly right. All of this transformation, again, whether it's sustainability or whether it's innovation or whether it's diversity and inclusion, is all about change management. And we have to change our mindsets. We have to understand not only the narrative, but what those outcomes could look like, how we're all aligned in getting there, and what's in it for everybody involved, because ultimately, that's what it takes to move people in new directions. Change is hard. Change management itself is, I think, a term that doesn't give itself credence into the importance of helping people change their minds for the betterment of all humanity, or betterment of the team, or the betterment of the company. Eric, what are you not hearing from businesses, whether that's a new building or whether that's an existing building, in terms of, for example, other priorities that aren't as important as they might think that they are? And when you're not getting the phone call, so to speak, or you're not getting in the email, what would you tell them to get them to shift their priorities into something more meaningful?
Over this last crazy year, diversity, equity, inclusion came up much more, as it should. But companies are still thinking of these things in silos, right? Oh, look, now we need to turn our attention from carbon to DEI. And I don't really see that as the case. In truth, if you do your sustainability correctly, you're weaving DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, everything you're doing. I think it's all part of a continuous approach to business. And that, by the way, can be much more lucrative and profitable for you and your bottom line. So embracing diversity, embracing equity, inclusion is a key to sustainability and vice versa. But it's also, more importantly, an opportunity to really rethink your company. The companies that are routinely hailed as the most innovative and the most profitable are the ones that are doing this, right? That old school way of thinking is what's failing. And that's why you've seen all of the financial institutional investors demanding this. It's why you've seen the major insurers essentially calculating climate risk as part of their calculations. It's why we've seen all these amazing trends over the last few years, really leading us to the inevitable conclusion that we're going to have to do something about climate change if we're really going to take this seriously. I had a conversation with, I won't say the company because I'm under NDA, but it's one of the top 6 largest insurance companies in the world. And we had a meeting to discuss their new rollout of a climate risk-based model to pricing. In other words, if you live in the southeast corner of the country, you might not be able to get insured anymore because of the routine hurricanes that come through there. And so you're going to have whole swaths of the country where you won't be able to get homeowners insurance. And so we're talking about, well, how do we price that in some way that somehow can work? So things are changing, and it's in pretty profound ways.
Yeah. Hey, as being a consumer of said plan and new pricing programs in climate risk areas, here being Southern California at the moment, this is a reality, and I don't want the world to have to react because of, I say there's 2 moments of innovation. There's the aha moment, which is, I have this great idea. Let's build this. Let's have a positive impact on society. And then there's the uh-oh moment. Oh, we can't get insured. uh, what are we going to do? And I think that, as we're winding down here, Eric, I think that's the plan. You set it in the old way of thinking, and people who refuse to let go of that old way of thinking. I was having a conversation with Seth Godin last week, and he said like industrial capitalists are like the absolute worst thing for progress because they just don't want to let go of that old way of thinking. And look, if it's the only way you know how to make money is by destroying everything around you, then we got to have a conversation about that. But in leaving our audience on a positive note, Eric, what advice would you share to someone to go be that leader, even if they're not in the C-suite right now, to bring about change within the organization?
I think for the last 30 years, we've tried to push this narrative that the individuals are to blame. It's not the car companies that are polluting. It's that you bought the car. It's right. It's not the home builders that are to blame. It's that you bought the polluting house. And I don't buy into that narrative. I'm really of the mindset that okay, these corporations really have an ability to transform the industry. Every major car maker now is committed to abandoning the internal combustion engine, which is great. They're all going electric, every single one of them, as they should. So what we need is, I need for you to demand this change. I don't need you to feel guilty about your lifestyle. I don't need you to like stop eating, meat. I mean, it'd be great if you did. But what I really need you to do is I really need you to demand this, right? So if you own a stock, demand it of the company that you're invested in. If you're buying things, demand it of the companies you're buying from, right? And that's how you make change. Just a couple months ago, Netflix came out with the most beautiful corporate climate commitment I've ever seen. It was just beautifully written. And not only does it have the we're going to be carbon neutral by this date target, but it laid out exactly, here's what we're doing today, here's what we're doing tomorrow, here's what we're doing next year, in a very elegant science-based approach to this. And it's all very reasonable. And their stock price is going up because of it. So that's the point. We can demand these things from the companies that we work with. I when I talk to universities, they tell me that the thing that has the most impact is when students come in and demand these things. And that's how you make change. Purdue University, which is in the Midwest, their students signed petitions, they rallied together, and they demanded bold climate action from their university. Well, guess what? They got it. Why? Because they're the customer. And so we need to remember that. And so on a positive note, we're making the change that we need to be, and you can help accelerate this by demanding more of it. And
I love it. I love it. And if you're a decision maker, don't buy into the silent or the vocal minority. Buy into the conscious customer, the conscious consumer, the conscious employee, and just be a leader and do what's right in the world. I think it's just about time we figure out how to make that the right thing. Eric, thank you so much. Get back to your family and your vacation. Enjoy your last day there. Such a pleasure. And if you get a chance, Eric, share with me that document you were just referring to, and I'll make sure to share it with the audience. My email is brian@briansolis.com. Eric, cheers. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
With that said, woo. I got to process. This stuff it's so easy to get angry about this, but it's also got to translate that energy into making a positive impact, as Eric shared, to go out and make a change. With that, I want to set the stage so that we can jump right in for our next guest. His name is Robert LoCascio. He's the founder of LivePerson, and it's a company that we see a lot of customers integrating with, but it's really important, especially now as businesses have to reimagine customer engagement, especially now after COVID thrust everybody into a digital first world, that we saw customers demand more digital engagement, new ways to use digital for engagement, not just using digital to digitize, I should say, paper-based processes. And so with that, let me bring Rob onto the show. Rob, welcome to Intersections.
How are you doing, Brian?
I'm doing all right, man. Thank you for joining us today. So Rob, why don't you take a few minutes here, share a little bit about your work and also LivePerson.
Yeah, I started the company 25 years ago. I invented when you chat online for customer care. If you ever did web chat, that was my original technology in 97, and then took the company public in 2000. So I've been 20 years, 21st year, this is my 21st year running a public company.
Wow.
And but we made a pretty major move about 5 years ago. We launched a whole platform around AI and conversational AI and messaging, and this whole concept around having this ongoing persistent connection with consumers, and then be able to do this very personalized service using AI, using conversational AI. And then that's kind of the big move we made, and it's worked out really well for us. And we have about 18,000 customers today. About 500 of the largest in the world work with us.
That's amazing, and I'm sure you've seen business accelerate in the last year, as we have at Salesforce. It's a really fascinating time. I'm sure, especially going back to the 90s. For those who don't remember, Netscape, the browser, was introduced in 94. Amazon.com launched in 1994. We really started to see the consumerization of the internet, and essentially what became what I call digital Darwinism, how digital was going to change people's behaviors, whether at work or whether at home. Every industry, every vertical, that over time, once people experienced digital transactions, digital engagement, that it was going to forever change their standards and their expectations. And what we saw in the last year, Rob, I'd love to hear what you saw in the last year with the pandemic, forcing everybody to accelerate years and years and years of digital plans in this regard, just in order to be able to work, to survive, to essentially keep things stable, and then we could get to growth later. But what have you seen specifically lately?
Well, last year was pretty major in our world because the contact centers got shut down because of COVID. People couldn't work in those contact centers. Anyway, our strategy, which was we were really picking up momentum, was really about shifting voice calls to messaging and AI, and not having human agents take calls. So once the agents were sent home and there was a lot of disruption, the first thing they did was our customers turned to us and said, we need your technology on a different level. And so our increase in traffic, we normally do about 50 million conversations a month. This is February of last year. By April, we were up at 80 million conversations, from 50 to 80 in a matter of weeks. It was pretty amazing. And then it's continued to go. And then what we saw is also retailers came and said, Chipotle, the burrito, quick casual restaurants, like they need a way for people to build burritos through a messenger platform, pick them up at the door. So all of this stuff started to just kick in. And what they found was, with conversational AI, you could personalize the experience. They all had websites. Everyone has websites, but consumers, very few of them, convert on a website. When you think about it, conversion rates are like 2% or something, if you're lucky. So the ability to really get consumers engaged on their mobile device, in their pockets, have them connected with you, you can be proactive with them. There was this shift in mentality around owning the consumer. Like they left us. They don't show up in stores. They're not calling, or they're calling, they're being put on hold because we don't have agents. So how do we just stay connected with them? And that was the big mind shift that happened last year.
Yeah, that's a really big deal. I know that there are some customers where we share integrations with Salesforce, LivePerson, sure. And one of our big aspirations is to help companies reimagine what that digital experience could be. Like you mentioned, everybody has websites, but I don't know that we've had a conversation about what makes a good website for a really long time.
There is no good website. Websites suck. They're like, everyone is living in a digital feudal system, and they need to realize it's like, I don't care if you're the largest brands in the world or you're just someone who's a small mid-market, you're living in a feudal system, and the feudal system goes one or two ways. Well, it goes one way. You never own your consumer. That's the idea of the lords. And the lords are Amazon, Facebook, and Google. And basically, it's pretty straightforward. Like, they sit between you and your customers, and their job is to make their systems do that. And they do it very well. And what that allows them to do is extract as much value on their side, while you're left with constantly having to buy even your existing base of consumers back to your digital properties. Or if you're a small business or even mid-size, you could be sitting on Amazon in their marketplace, and they're taking 10, 20, 30% of your revenue, and they don't give you customer data. So like, they bifurcated you. The conversational commerce is about an always on connection. Like, once you connect with the consumer through that messaging platform, they're yours. Like, you don't have to go pay for them again. So it's a very powerful tool. And you know, we can't live in this world like this anymore. Like, these companies, which are great companies, it's the first time in history that an advertising platform is larger than the people who advertise on it. Like, the New York Times and TV stations and radio stations were never as large as Procter and Gamble. You know, we're never as large as the largest consumer brand. And today these companies are larger than the companies that actually advertise on them, because they create a model that they own the consumer. And this is a way to take back the ownership. You get higher conversion rates, higher, you know, NPS and CSAT. Like, consumers want to be connected. They don't want to keep going back to the Lord there, to the feudal Lord. The websites suck. By the way, websites suck because Google has dictated to all of us, unless you have a top nav, a bottom nav, and a bunch of content the way we want it, you can't get indexed in SEO, which is it's sucky optimization, because it doesn't work. Like, you know, you can redo the website 300 times, and I've been around 20 something years. I've seen websites be changed at companies. Some of our customers with 15 change. Every new marketing person comes in, they change the website, you get 1% conversion rate, because Google dictated how to make 1% work for you. You know, if you were at the internet where I was in 95, you would have seen websites were all going in their different way. There were websites with text, websites with pictures, websites with Flash, websites with all sorts of stuff. And we were all creating, and then Google just brought it all together to be like, unless you do this and you make it really bad, we won't index you. And if you try to change, by the way, if you have some novel idea to make your website highly more better converting, we probably won't index you. We won't let you get indexed at the top of search. It's draconian.
Well, Rob, I feel like you're being shy, so don't hold back in what you really think.
I'm speaking for my customers. Like, I'm just so tired, and they're tired, and we're all tired, and it's time for a new, you know, it's a new way. Conversational AI allows every one of our customers to design a consumer experience which is the way they want to do it and the way their consumers want to be communicated with. There's no top nav, there's no bottom nav, there's not us dictate. Now, we know best practices, but there's no dictation of like terms of service. Like, you own your consumer.
Well, let's talk about that, because a lot of my work lately has been around conversational AI, and at Salesforce we have chatbots that are powered by Einstein, and that's the AI, I think, is where our business customers kind of get confused as to what's the role of technology in the conversation. When you have, sorry, this is working from home, so you're gonna hear my dogs bark. But when you hear the term conversational AI, it's important to remember that the word conversation is in there for a reason. And when you look at the implementation of a lot of this technology today, what we miss is the idea that you have to design for a conversational experience, regardless of whether or not it's powered by a bot or a human being has to come into the conversation. And so I think about this as experience architecture, Rob, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, which is, I like to say that you have good conversational AI if it could pass the Turing test. I say that jokingly, of course, but you don't ever want the consumer or the customer to feel like they just put a chat bot in front of me, like they put up IVRs in front of customer service agents, so I can't get a human being here. As long as people feel like they're getting good engagement, good information, then it doesn't matter to them. But how do you convince on the buy side, on the implementation side, people to reimagine the role of technology to be more human?
Our goal is to get to, it's got to be over like a 92% confidence rate, as in a rate of intent to goal. And if you're below that, like if your bot is in the 80s, like it craps out 20% of the time, which is not very, very much, you would think. But that percentage would make a consumer think it's an IVR, think it's like a digital IVR, press one, press two, because it's not reaching. So you've got to be in the 90s when you're doing the design. I think the important part also is that we have found, and we built a set of tools that allows the agents to do the design. Because we found is that the contact center agents, who are the best conversationalists in the world, if you build the tools for them, they know how to sell, they know how to support, they've been trained, they have a personality for it. A lot of times these tools are being put in the hands of maybe someone in the digital or marketing or IT or some area where they're not customer facing all day. And we found that's the trouble. What they try to do is just look at transcripts, or they listen to voice calls, and they're like, oh, people ask for this, and then give them 1, 2, 3. They're replicating a broken model, which is usually they're getting the data source from voice. Mm-hmm. We have, like I said, we have over 80 million conversations we generate a month on our platform. We have about 1 billion in storage, and we use that as a baseline of data to provide the richness to the tool set, so that when a customer is working on our platform, they have a way to classify their intents based on the libraries we have. And we're giving, like, here's the best ways to do bill pay based on what we see on our platform of getting high sentiment scores. We call it meaningful connection scores, or NPS, people say, but that's, we have a thing called MCS. So I think that it's complex, but the goal is, it's not as much a Turing test, it's just a percentage of confidence so that the machine works in over 90% of the time. But that takes time. That could take a couple of weeks to get an intent tuned to get to there.
As Eric was mentioning earlier before you joined, now one of the ways that he helps businesses reimagine their existing buildings or their new buildings to be more sustainable is they have conversations that don't talk about sustainability. They talk about outcomes, more productivity, et cetera. What are you seeing that's effective in that regard? Because I can tell you that a lot of times that I work with organizations, it's really about technology. We need chatbots, but really, when you put that experience, that customer experience, front and center, there's a lot of outcomes that can be positive for the organization there. So what are you seeing?
I mean, it's you mean from the consumer's perspective or the brand's perspective?
The brand's perspective. So on the buy side.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely the brands are the 5 years ago when we launched our platform, it was like a very novel thing. The idea of automations, or we call them, to me, bots is a 4-letter word. So I try not to use it because it's just a terribly 4-letter word. And it's bots and shit are the 2 4-letter words that probably are the same, because most bots are built without intention in themselves. So I think the brands now all want it. You're absolutely right. They then are trying to understand the consumer, like what is the consumer's intent. But I think the part that we're missing in the middle, and the thing that I think we really focus on, is there's a sense of Amazonian, like we're all living in an Amazon world, and success does that. As in, a lot of brands I talk to believe they need to be Amazon for their industries. And Amazon is a logistics company, and logistics companies before even Amazon existed, made things, efficient. That's the goal. 1 click, low price, large selection, ship it to your house in an hour. So, did you just leave me here?
That's Sorry, terrible. My dog is barking.
That's terrible. Yeah. My elephant's barking over here.
Oh, that's good. That's good. What are you using a roadcaster, Rob?
No, really. I've got an elephant over there. Hang on 1 second. So
I think we could talk about chatbots, or we could go to comedy. I gotta say, I love your bots as a 4-letter word, but don't let me detract from what you were saying. Get back.
Bots spelled backwards is shit. Remember that. Bots spelled backwards is shit. BOTS. You can make the whole thing. So actually, if you go bots spelled backwards is TSOB. It's not shit.
Oh god.
So what I think people are trying to do is Amazon.
I didn't get my laugh track going.
That's my turkey laugh track. So I gotta get all my sound effects going over here. So the thing that they're trying to do, like I'm not joking. I was with a prospect, a banking prospect over in Europe. I'll leave him nameless. And I was with the head of all consumer, both branch and digital. And this person was new to the business, but they've been in banking their whole life. I said, what's your vision? What's your vision? And they said, I don't want to be known. My vision is I don't want the consumer to even know we exist. That's hers. I'm like, what do you mean by that? It's the Amazonian thing, which is like, I want to get a mortgage, like one click and get a loan. And I don't want people like they can get a checking account. And I'm like, where do you go from there? Like, where do you go from there? And I'm like, nobody wears an Amazon t-shirt. By the way, I've never seen anyone wear an Amazon t-shirt. There's no kid who's wearing I've got my cool Amazon t-shirt and my Supreme shirt. I've got my Nike and my Apple shirt, and then I'm wearing Amazon out. Amazon is not a brand. It's a logistics powerhouse, and we all love it for that. But being a brand, which most companies aspire to, like saying that you want to be simple, and everyone keeps using this word, I want to simplify everything. I'm like, I got it. It's called digital. But above that is, what is the relationship you're trying to create with your consumers? Because if they don't get a shot of oxytocin, if they don't get a shot of love from you, not dopamine, but love, the oxytocin, the chemical that creates that connection, they're gonna leave you. And it goes back to the feudal system. The feudal system, a digital feudal system, they want you never to do oxytocin. They want it to be all about your commodity. You're part of this great merchant marketplace, that you're one of many, and they want to drive you down to nothing. And that's their goal, because they make more money when they do that. They get a bigger marketplace. Your goal is to create a meaningfully connected, ongoing, sustainable, long-term value relationship. And that doesn't happen unless you can do certain things. Now, conversational AI, as you know, AI and questions and answers allows you to do hyper-personalization, or I'll call it mass personalization, which is they're contrary. They contradict. Mass and personalization are never together in the same sentence. You can with AI. I can create a personalization with somebody, get to know them, ask them questions. But people look at it more like an IVR. Mm-hmm. What's like press one versus like, why don't you warm them up? Like, think of it like going out to a bar and dating. Like, you don't go right out to someone and say, do you want to sleep with me? Take a vacation with me, or do this? Like, that may be in the back of your head. Like, do you want to do these three things? But you usually say, like, who are you? Where do you live? What do you do? What's going on? And it's called empathy. We build empathy. We build empathy through conversations, and that's the power of it. But most of it, we're living in an Amazon world. I just want to get them to press one click. And they try to take the chatbots, the 4-letter things, and make them one click, or they make them 3 clicks, and they think that's great. You lose the opportunity to create empathy. You lose the opportunity to create the oxytocin if you just do that. So digital is beyond Amazon. It's a way to create a meaningfully warm relationship with your consumers.
One of the things that you just said just gave me goosebumps, because oxytocin, the love chemical, is at the root of experience design. And I wrote a book about this in terms of experience architecture. So thinking about ways to use innovative technologies, not just to improve logistics or transactions, or time to get somebody out of the system. It was really about using those touch points as what they were named after, which is the touch. And when you have that opportunity to touch a customer, what is it that you want to impress upon them or impart upon them? And experience, which is a word we're all using, customer experience, user experience, at the core of what that word means. As I was writing the book, I tried to find like this meaningful definition of experience, because we're using it so often. It's kind of like, I don't want to lose the importance of it. And experience actually is a human reaction to a moment. And in that reaction, you're going to think something, you're going to feel something, and it could be oxytocin, or it could be like, this absolutely sucks. And either way, as a consumer, you're going to remember it, because that experience, if profound in either direction, becomes something you remember, and compounded becomes how you think of that organization. So the way that I'm hearing you, and what I want people to hear in this, is that when you deploy conversational AI, you have an opportunity to replicate a transaction like IVR, or an opportunity to give somebody the semblance that they are valued. And that when you use conversational AI or any technology to help someone feel that they're valued, it comes back at you in net new revenue. So in our research last year in the state of service, we found that 91% of customers said that if they felt like they got a good customer experience during the support moment, that they would buy more things. I don't that just, of course they will, because they appreciate that moment. So with the couple of minutes that we have left, Rob, what advice do you have? I don't even want to get to what's next, because I think a lot of people aren't getting the right now right. So what advice do you have for them to rethink their strategy or their investment in conversational AI?
First, like, you can generate a ton more revenue. We see 25%, 30% conversion rates that you'll never find in another digital property. And that's number one. And that happens because of, like what you said, you start to establish a relationship with someone, they're going to come back. You can be proactive with them too. You can come back to them a week later. Unlike the web, where they come and they go and they bounce, you're connected to them through their mobile device. So your ability to create these very connected moments are really important. And that's why I think the COVID is a wake up call for a lot of people around digital. And the biggest wake up call is, how are you going to really own your consumers? Mm-hmm. How do you stay connected with them so when the next thing happens? And by the way, the pandemic is just like being competing. I don't want to, but it's like you have your competitors are out there doing stuff all day to create a connection, to keep it loose. The pandemic just made it go away. Like, people didn't show up in your store, but sometimes they wouldn't show up in your store because they went to a competitor, because you're not creating a relationship with them. And the oxytocin part is really what's important. We got too focused on dopamine. Everyone knows Facebook was like, and near whatever his name was, his whole book around habits and, the whole nudging and dopamine shots. And we in digital started to believe we got to get dopamine. But we know for brand building, for customer connection, it's oxytocin. It's creating a relationship, and oxytocin will be sustainable. Dopamine may be addictive. It may create a habit, a short-term nudge, but oxytocin is the thing that people talk to their friends about. I really love this brand. I was texting with the guy who sells pecans, and I usually just bought my pecans on Amazon, but I found this guy's local guy, and he's on using actually our product. He's using our platform, and I found him on our platform, and I was messaging with him, and he started telling me this story about it. I said, "How'd you get into pecan? He has a farm in Texas." He said, "Well, my house, I rented a house in another farm. It burnt down. My in-laws bought this other house in the farm, and we started this thing a couple of years ago, and we're just really working hard." And thanks, he sent me pictures and told me his story. And even though he's got a website, it shows the family, and he took the time to text with me. I took the time to tell him, "I love your pecans. I know they're fresh, not sprayed with chemicals." And I don't know how much he charges me compared to what I was buying on Amazon anymore. It probably is like 50 cents more, or who knows, but I want to support him. I care for him now. I don't even know him, but I care. This guy, his house burnt down. His in-laws put up money so he could buy the farm. Am I supporting him or Jeff Bezos to fly the fucking moon? I mean, I don't care about Jeff Bezos going up, and for $25 million, you can join him up in the thing. And I don't know if you saw, but I think it's like 50,000 people now have signed a petition that he shouldn't come home, or 100,000 have signed they should leave him up there. Yeah, look it up online. 100,000 people said, and there's a whole movement in Brooklyn that says Bezos. No, it said Brooklyn, not Bezos. And so your customers are looking for Brooklyn. They're looking for the pecan story. And if you give it to them, they will be with you forever. And you can do that only through conversational commerce. That's where, because what I know he did for me, he took time out of his day. He took time out of his day to just message me back and say, "Here's my story." And I may never chat with him again, but he took time out of his day. If I looked at his website, just automatically bought, who cares? I'll buy from somebody else some pecans. That's the opportunity here.
Man, Rob, I could talk to you all day. I love this. I'm gonna have to invite you back when you have time, Rob. Thank you for sharing these stories.
Okay, Brian.
Thanks for helping businesses transform to become more human. Let's get everybody that oxytocin hit. Let's quit microdosing on dopamine. Let's build relationships. Thank you, my friend.
All one big elf. Go elephant hunting, everybody. Go elephant.
Oh man, so good. See you later, Rob.
Later, Brian.
Oh, that was great. Okay, well, let's see. So I got to give him one more rim shot. Yes. What a great conversation. Thank you so much for listening, for tuning in, for sharing your observations and your questions. Intersections is what it is today because of you. I know John feels like he is missing out today. We're wishing him luck in his endeavor today in Denver. Again, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching Intersections. Please share your thoughts. Please subscribe to our newsletter. Let me see if I could actually find that. I didn't do a good job as producer today. I got so sucked into the conversation. This is the link to our newsletter. It is text. I'm kind of linked out there. Here's our website if you want to watch. We archive every episode here at intersectionslive.com. You can follow John and myself on social media. You could visit our websites. John is at John Kao. I'm at Brian Solis. With that said, I just want to again say thank you. Thank you for sharing these comments. This is fantastic. It's always fantastic. If you have suggestions, please let us know. My email is brian@briansolis.com. Now, I'm going to figure out here how to send us out with an outro. All right. Thanks again, everybody. Be well.